I have great pleasure in welcoming the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Her Excellency the Right Honourable Margaret Thatcher, and I invite her to address the General Assembly.
Mr. President, it gives me great pleasure to return to the podium of this Assembly. When I last spoke here 4 years ago, on the 40th anniversary of the United Nations, the message that I and others like me gave was one of encouragement to the organization to play the great role allotted to it. Of all the challenges faced by the world community in those 4 years, one has grown clearer than any other in both urgency and importance. I refer to the threat to our global environment. I shall take the opportunity of addressing the General Assembly to speak on that subject alone. From a moon's eye view of that strange and beautiful anomaly in our solar system, that is the Earth. Of course, we have learned much detail about our environment as we have looked back at it from space. But nothing has made a more profound impact on us than these two facts. First, as the British scientist Fred Hoyle wrote long before space travel was a reality, he said, "Once a photograph of the Earth taken from the outside is available, a new idea as powerful as any other in history will be let loose." That powerful idea is the recognition of our shared inheritance on this planet. We know more clearly than ever before that we carry common burdens, face common problems, and must respond with common action. And second, as we travel through space, as we pass one dead planet after another, we look back on our Earth, a speck of life in an infinite void. It is life itself, incomparably precious, that distinguishes us from the other planets. For over 40 years, that has been the main task of this United Nations, to bring peace where there was war, comfort where there was misery, life where there was death. The struggle hasn't always been successful. There have been years of failure. But recent events have brought the promise of a new dawn, of new hope. Relations between the Western nations and the Soviet Union and her allies, long frozen in suspicion and hostility, have begun to thaw. While the conventional political dangers, the threat of global annihilation, the fact of regional war, appear to be receding, we have all recently become aware of another insidious danger. It is as menacing in its way as those more accustomed perils with which international diplomacy has concerned itself for centuries. It is the prospect of irretrievable damage to the atmosphere, to the oceans, to Earth itself. It is mankind and his activities which are changing the environment of our planet in damaging and dangerous ways. Is that an environmental or climatic change produced by man may take on a self-sustaining or runaway quality and may be irreversible. And they led my correspondent to put forward the interesting idea of a world polar watch, amongst other initiatives, which will observe the world's climate system and allow us to understand how it works. Mr. President, the evidence is there. The damage is being done. What do we, the international community, do about it? In some areas, the action required is primarily for individual nations or groups of nations to take. I'm thinking, for example, of action to deal with the pollution of rivers. And many of us now see the fish back in rivers from which they had disappeared. I'm thinking of action to improve agricultural methods, good husbandry which ploughs back nourishment to the soil, rather than the cut and burn, which has damaged and degraded so much land in some parts of the world. And I'm thinking of the use of nuclear power, which, despite the attitude of so-called Greens, is the most environmentally safe form of energy. But the problem of global climate change is one that affects us all, and action will only be effective if it's taken at the international level. There's no good squabbling over who is responsible or who should pay. Whole areas of our planet could be subject to drought and starvation if the pattern of rains and monsoons were to change as a result of the destruction of forests and the accumulation of greenhouse gases. We have to look forward, not backward. And we shall only succeed in dealing with the problems through a vast international cooperative effort. Before we act, we need the best possible scientific assessment. Otherwise, we risk making matters worse. We must use science to cast a light ahead so that we can move step by step in the right direction. The United Kingdom has agreed to take on the task of coordinating such an assessment within the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, an assessment which will be available to everyone by the time of the second World Climate Conference next year. But that will take us only so far. The report will not be able to tell us where the hurricanes will be striking, who will be flooded, or how often and severe the droughts will be. Yet we'll need to know these things if we are to adapt to future climate change. And that means we must expand our capacity to model and predict climate change. We can test our skills and methods by seeing whether they would have successfully predicted past climate change for which historical records exist. Britain has some of the leading experts in this field, and I'm pleased to be able to tell you that the United Kingdom will be establishing a new centre for the prediction of climate change, which will lead the effort to improve our prophetic capacity. It will also provide the advanced computing facilities that scientists need, and it will be open to experts from all over the world, especially from the developing countries, who can come to the United Kingdom and contribute to this vital work. But as well as the science, we need to get the economics right. That means, first, we must have continued economic growth in order to generate the wealth required to pay for the protection of the environment. But it must be growth which doesn't plunder the planet today and leave our children to deal with the consequences tomorrow. And second, we must resist the simplistic tendency to blame modern multinational industry for the damage which is being done to the environment. Far from being the villains, it is on them that we rely to do the research and find the solutions. It's industry which will develop safe alternative chemicals for refrigerators and air conditioning. It's industry which will devise biodegradable plastics. It's industry which will find the means to treat pollutants and make nuclear waste safe. And many companies, as you know, already have massive research programs. The multinationals have to take the long view. There will be no profit or satisfaction for anyone if pollution continues to destroy our planet. As people's consciousness of environmental needs rises, they're turning increasingly to ozone-friendly and other environmentally safe products. The market itself acts as a corrective. The new products sell, and those which caused environmental damage are disappearing from our shelves. And by making these new products widely available, industry will make it possible for developing countries to avoid many of the mistakes which we older industrialized countries have made. We should always remember that free markets are a means to an end. They would defeat their object if, by their output, they did more damage to the quality of life through pollution than the well-being they achieve by the production of goods and services. On the basis, then, of sound science and sound economics, we need to build a strong framework for international action. It's not new institutions that we need. Rather, we need to strengthen and improve those which already exist. In particular, the World Meteorological Organization and the United Nations Environment Programme. The United Kingdom has recently more than doubled its contribution to UNEP, and we urge others who have not done so and who can afford it to do the same. And the central organs of the United Nations, like this General Assembly, must also be seized of a problem which reaches into virtually all aspects of their work and will do so still more in the future. The most pressing task which faces us at the international level is to negotiate a framework convention on climate change, a sort of good conduct guide for all nations. Fortunately, we have a model in the action already taken to protect the ozone layer. The Vienna Convention in 1985 and the Montreal Protocol in 1987 established landmarks in international law. They aim to prevent, rather than just cure, a global environmental problem. I believe we should aim to have a convention on global climate change ready by the time the World Conference on Environment and Development meets in 1992. That will be among the most important conferences the United Nations has ever held. I hope that we shall all accept a responsibility to meet this timetable. The 1992 conference is indeed already being discussed among many countries in many places. And I draw particular attention to the very valuable discussion that members of the Commonwealth had under the Prime Minister of Malaysia's chairmanship at our recent Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Kuala Lumpur. But a framework isn't enough. It will need to be filled out with specific undertakings, or protocols in diplomatic language, on the different aspects of climate change. These protocols must be binding, and there must be effective regimes to supervise and monitor their application. Otherwise, those nations which accept and abide by environmental agreements, thus adding to their industrial costs, will lose out competitively to those who do not. The negotiation of some of these protocols will undoubtedly be difficult, and no issue will be more contentious than the need to control emissions of carbon dioxide, the major contributor, apart from water vapor, to the greenhouse effect. We can't just do nothing, but the measures we take must be based on sound scientific analysis of the effect of the different gases and the ways in which these can be reduced. In the past, there's been a tendency to solve one problem at the expense of making others worse. The United Kingdom therefore proposes that we prolong the role of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change after it submits its report next year, so that it can provide an authoritative scientific base for the negotiation of this and other protocols. We can then agree to targets to reduce the greenhouse gases and how much individual countries should contribute to their achievement. We think it important that this should be done in a way which enables all our economies to continue to grow and develop. The challenge for our negotiators on matters like this is as great as for any disarmament treaty. The Intergovernmental Panel's work must remain on target, and we must not allow ourselves to be diverted into fruitless and divisive arguments. Time is too short for that. Mr. President, the environmental challenge which confronts the whole world demands an equivalent response from the whole world. Every country will be affected, and no one can opt out. We should work through this great organization and its agencies to secure worldwide agreements on ways to cope with the effects of climate change, the thinning of the ozone layer, and the loss of precious species. We need a realistic program of action and an equally realistic timetable. Each country has to contribute, and those countries who are industrialized must contribute more to help those who are not. But another of the beliefs of Darwin's era should help to see us through: the belief in reason and the scientific method. Reason is humanity's special gift. It allows us to understand the structure of the nucleus. It enables us to explore the heavens. It helps us to conquer disease. Now we must use our reason to find a way in which we can live with nature and not dominate nature.